Hey everybody! So today we're going to talk about the 10th house in the natal chart. Here's the card for it. And the 10th house has an affinity for Capricorn energy and Earth energy. It's the last of the houses that have affinity for Earth energy. We've already done the 2nd and the 6th. So what is the 10th house? Regardless of what house system you use, the 10th house is the zenith of the chart, meaning it's the highest house in the chart, at the top of the chart. If you use Placidus, the midheaven will fall at the cusp of the 10th house. If you use whole signs, the midheaven will fall usually somewhere between the 9th and the 11th houses, and any other house system. I'm just using those two here as examples because they tend to be the most widely used. So the midheaven, we'll start here. The midheaven is like it's the version of you that you want to be when you grow up, essentially. The very best version of you, who you aspire to be, who you want to be. So if it falls, okay, so if you use whole signs, for instance, if it falls in the 10th house, not necessarily the cusp, but the 10th house, in the 10th house, that version of you would probably have something to do with your career, with your social standing, social capital, those sorts of things. But say if it fell in your 9th house, it might have, the midheaven might have more to do with the journey that you take to get to your career. It might have something more to do with that, or just the idea of journeys in general, journeys throughout your life, having to do with the most idealized version of you. So you will, depending on, what house system you use, the midheaven might, fall in a different house with the 10th. So back to the 10th house. The 10th house is the house that shows, it shows goals, not necessarily long-term goals. That's really more of an 11th house thing, the long-term goals, but just goals in general. That's a 10th house thing. Social standing, social capital, all of those things, how you're received socially, in the public. That's a 10th house thing. The 10th house, opposite the 4th, right on the wheel, it's a very public house. It is the public side of life, the public spheres of life. So it's it's not a private place, right? Any planets that fall in the 10th will play into, what energy you need to express in the public, spheres of life. And the sign ruling the 10th house cusp will show how you need to express yourself in those areas of life, or how the planetary energy needs to be expressed. Something else that the 10th house deals with is authority, both your own authority, how you handle authority, your own authority, and how you respond to that of other people. So depending on what's going on with your 10th house, you may or may not respond real well to other people's authority, or you may or may not wield your own very well, or feel very comfortable with it. Of course, all of that depends on what's going on in your chart across the board. Okay, so career is another thing that's here. Work and career, I feel like they're more parallel things. They're not, you can have a career, right? Be known as something, your career is this, but the work that you do, it might fall under that umbrella, but the work that you do isn't necessarily your career. Does that make sense? Or that's how I think about it in my mind. So your career is here. What you're known for doing publicly is here in this house. It's not necessarily the work that you do. But when you want to look at something like, what kind of career should I have? What kind of career field should I go into? This is certainly one of the houses that you would want to look at, along with the 6th. Because as we've talked about before in the last video, the 6th is the actual work that you do, right? That's where that's found in daily life. Now, depending on, you'd also want to, of course, look at where the ruler of the 10th house cusp falls in the chart to give you an idea of what house the 10th house will bend to, what house it serves. Unless, of course, the ruler of the 10th house cusp is in the 10th, and then the 10th house serves itself. So yeah, you would definitely want to take those things into consideration here, for sure. Okay, so another thing, sometimes you'll see things like fame. Do I have I'll see this on like different forums and things like that. Do I have any indicators for fame in my chart or anything like that? Well, the 10th house is a house that you might look at for this. It also matters what you mean by fame, right? Because there are good sorts of fame, and then there's infamy or notoriousness, being notorious. So it does kind of depend on what what you mean by fame. But if you have planets in the 10th, I would say, I don't know, and again, this is not universal. If you've got the sun in the 10th, I'm not at all saying that you're going to be famous necessarily, but something like the sun in the 10th house could be an indicator for that. Could be. I don't want people out there thinking that I'm saying they're going to be famous because they've got the sun in the 10th. I want to make that really clear. That could be an indicator that you would look for. I'll also say this though, other houses that you might want to look at for fame. The 11th house is another one, and the 12th, which sounds weird, but it is a house that there have been a fair amount of famous people with planets in the 12th. So those 3 houses are kind of where I might look first when somebody's like, will I be famous? So that might be where I would start. But again, just because you've got planets in the 10th house or in the 11th house or in the 12th house does not mean you'll be famous necessarily. And of course, there are people that are famous that don't have any planets there in any of those houses, right? So it's not a universal thing, but those are the houses that I would look at first. Okay, and also I kind of hit on this, I think, in the 4th house video, but the idea of parents, the notion of parents, I don't really think of this as, some people feel like the 10th house always represents the father, and some people feel like the 4th house always represents the mother, and vice versa. Sometimes people feel like the 10th house always represents the mother, and the 4th house always represents the father. And I mean, however you want to read that is whatever. I mean, this is like the parental axis. So however you feel, whatever you feel like resonates for you, go for it. I prefer to be a little more fluid about it. I feel like you can find, in some people's charts, it's very clear that the 10th house is the father and the 4th house is the mother, and vice versa. And sometimes you can see a little bit of each parent in both of the houses. So I don't know. I'm personally not that rigid about it, but if it helps you to, if you feel like being less fluid about that and being more specific is good for you, then do that. I'd never tell you not to. I feel like people should read how it works for them. And let me see, is there anything else I missed on this card? Oh, okay. Reputation, which I kind of already touched on with social capital, but reputation. The reputation that you hold in the public spheres of life would be found here, and what, you know, how you handle your reputation, what kind of reputation you strive for, all of those things would be dependent upon any signs, on the sign that rules the house cusp, and on any planets that fall there. And I'll say this as well: if you're using something that's not Placidus, like whole, if you're using whole signs, and the midheaven falls in like the 9th or the 11th house, I would also put an emphasis on the ruler of the planetary ruler of the midheaven and where it falls in the chart, to give you an idea of how that version of yourself that you want to be when you grow up comes out best, where it comes out best and what it serves, what house it serves. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this. And oh yeah, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can follow us on Instagram. The handle is Let's Fuck with Astrology. I'm at Saturn Season Astrology on Instagram. Natalie is at Eternal Astrology on Instagram. And if you are watching this on IG and want to follow us on YouTube or subscribe or whatever the hell people do, whatever terminology is best to use here, the link is below for the YouTube. So I will see you all later.